Hello, everybody in La La Land. This is a first. We are coming to you from the University of Arizona College of Agriculture, Controlled Environment Agriculture Center webinar. This is a first because of, you know what? There is a nasty organism out there that has forced all of us to take a little detour and become homebound. I call it house arrest. And so while being in that situation, I came across very recently a workshop that the College of Agriculture Extension Service has organized in Yuma, Arizona. And one of the speakers at that workshop, which was designed to help Arizona farmers transition to hemp production, was a very interesting speaker who is also our speaker today. Her name is Andrea Yasmin Carter. She is a PhD candidate in the School of Plant Sciences, and she has already garnered a fantastic array of activities, expeditions, and activities in preparation for her graduation this coming May. Everybody cross your fingers. That has taken her to as far away places as Cuba, China, Tunisia, arid lands, and a variety of experiences, all designed to look into the physiological mechanisms of drought tolerance in grains, specifically barley, and how industrial hemp fits into this scheme. So today she's going to be talking to us about industrial hemp overview and research opportunities. And in my publicity piece for Andrea, I wrote that she is a unique graduate student who has already forged a multi-pronged career in plant sciences, ranging in issues from water scarcity all the way to plant production and how to help rural communities deal with lack of water resources and other things. So Andrea, the stage, as it were, the airways are all yours. Take it away.
All righty. Well, thank you so much for such a kind opening. And thank you everyone at the Controlled Environment Center for hosting me and allowing me to give this talk today. I'm really excited to share what I've learned so far in industrial hemp. It's a new crop, so we're all learning in it. And today I'll share what I've been learning about here in Arizona and the potential for this crop to be a new crop for Arizona. So I'll start out. As Rafi said, I'm a PhD candidate in the Department of Plant Science. And today I'll be talking about industrial hemp. I'll do an overview and talk about some research opportunities. So a little more background about myself. As Rafi mentioned, I've been studying drought tolerance, particularly in barley. And I work with solar barley primarily, which is a one irrigation barley that was developed here at the U of A. Most of my work has been field trials at the campus agricultural station here in Tucson, looking at physiology and particularly rooting characteristics of drought-tolerant barley to figure out what are the physiological characteristics associated with drought tolerance. And I bring this up to share that this is the type of work that will help crops like hemp be successful in Arizona. So we've done a lot of this kind of basic agronomic research on all of our other commodity crops, but it's really lacking in hemp. So it's quite exciting as a younger person getting into agronomic science. It's a whole new field. So A brief history about industrial hemp. It's quite interesting. The kind of mixed bag of how it's been a celebrated and then also demonized crop in the US and abroad. But interestingly, humans have been growing and using hemp for thousands of years. The oldest archaeological remains date back to 8000 BC. There it was used in China as for pottery and food and in medicine. Hemp has also enjoyed a long history in America. In fact, early colonies were growing hemp. There's lore about the Declaration of Independence being written on hemp paper. However, this all changed with the Marijuana Tax Act in 1937, which put a tax on all cannabis sales, including hemp. However, with World War II, there was a demand for high quality growth. And so the USDA started their Hemp for Victory program, which caused a resurgence in hemp production. There's a great YouTube video that's linked here, which is more or less a propaganda video of trying to get American farmers to grow hemp again. However, following the war, it went back to being a illegal crop, particularly in 1970, where it was classified as a Schedule I drug with the Controlled Substance Act. And since then, cultivation was largely illegal. That started changing in the mid-2000s, particularly with the passage of the Farm Bill in 2014, which allowed universities to start pilot hemp programs. So from that, we now have the 2018 Farm Bill, which is really the biggest accomplishment and progressive movement for growing of hemp in the US. So the Farm Bill authorized fully the cultivation and sale of industrial hemp. Not only just hemp, but it made its seeds, derivatives of hemp products, such as the CBD oils we might all be familiar with. They are now legal. And it's defined as any cannabis or part of the plant that has a delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol concentration of not more than 0.3%. So that's your THC percentage of less than 0.3. So hemp is no longer a Schedule I drug. And it is also allowed states and tribal nations to create their own regulatory programs. So hemp is now basically an ordinary agricultural commodity. It's now open for federal agricultural grants, crop insurance, farmers can participate in national banking, and universities can fully participate in agronomic research on this crop. So some of the hemp and farm bill programs that are now available to all US growers are some of the crop insurance and safety net programs through the USDA. They can also participate in Natural Resource Conservation Service administrative programs, be eligible for farm loans, and most recently, they can become, hemp crops can be certified organic. So this is quite exciting, as are some of the opportunities for Native nations. So not only can states create their own industrial hemp programs like the state of Arizona has done, but also tribes can create their own regulatory programs. Over 25 tribal nations have submitted tribal hemp production plans, which are available to view online. These are quite helpful if you are part of a tribe or working with a tribe. You can view plans that have been approved to help you design your own program. And there's several organizations that have and nonprofits that have started to support tribes in developing hemp programs. One great resource is the U.S. Domestic Hemp Production Program in the Office of Bill Richmond. They will conference call and talk with tribes in the development of their program. Another great resource is the Native American Agricultural Fund. So this was a charitable trust that was started due to a class action lawsuit where Native growers were discriminated against in farm loans. And they won the case, and this resulted in a $680 million compensation fund focused on agriculture in native nations. And interestingly, hemp production analysis is one of their 4 emphasis areas. They're really trying to encourage hemp production and this industry as an economic development opportunity for tribes. So for Arizona, we have our own industrial hemp program that is overseen by the Department of Agriculture. There are 5 kinds of licenses. You can get a grower, nursery, harvester, transporter, or processor. And the prices of each are listed on this slide. So the Arizona Department of Agriculture is your go-to place and their industrial hemp program website for information that's unique for growing or being a processor in Arizona. The requirements for any of to participate in the program, whether you're a grower or have a nursery, is to submit an application. You need a fingerprint clearance card, evidence of lawful presence, which is a W-2, an address, as well as paying your licensing fee, and a map of the field when appropriate. So these would be the GPS coordinates of your field or your greenhouse. These they want to document and need to submit to the USDA the locations and acreage of all industrial hemp production sites. So another good resource is this 2019 year-end report that was compiled by the Arizona Department of Ag. And from it, we can learn that the program in Arizona began in May 31st. That's when they passed the legislation allowing farmers to actually start applying for licenses. And the first plantings went in on June 7th of this past summer. So what they've learned from this first year is that we did have issues of non-compliant fields. This means that 25% of the acreage of industrial hemp was above the 0.3 legal limit for THC. However, as you can see that only 20% was non-compliant after remediation or retest. So that's the 20% that had to actually be destroyed. So overall, we had 84.6% of acres were compliant after remediation, which is pretty good. And the way farmers were able to remain compliant is they could blend or homogenize plant material to lower the THC percentage. So this was done through blending in leaf or stalk material to lower the THC. There was also on-site THC removal. That would be if a farm or processor was able to just distill out the CBD, therefore removing the THC. Another great thing the Department of Ag has published is they've shared the varieties that were primarily grown and how compliant they were. So what we can see here is there are about 5 varieties that passed with 100% compliance. So of all the field samples, 100% of them were below the THC limit. However, we can see that some of the varieties such as cherry wine or Hempress 2 were not always compliant, with Hempress 2 having very low compliance. That's a great, going back to this, it's a great resource if you're wondering what varieties to plant. So with this lack of compliance that we did see, there were stories and fear mongering somewhat of that Arizona is not a good place to grow hemp. There were stories such as this with Arizona climate blamed for off the charts THC failure. I think this is a little inflated, but it is true that 41% of the state hemp plants tested above this legal limit and 20% could not be harvested. Now, nationally, 20% of hemp lots exceeded that legal limit as well and were not harvested. So Arizona met or matched the national standards of going over the legal limit. But it does bring up this issue of variable seed quality and genetic expression and the role of planting time and stress As the report mentioned, planting started June 7th, which isn't an ideal time perhaps to be putting seedlings in the ground. So how does the Department of Ag define industrial hemp? It's any part of the plant that has a total delta-9 THC concentration of not more than 0.3%. But in Arizona's case, and this is about potentially to become the case nationally, this includes the total calculable amount of tetrahydrocannabinolic acid, so your THCA. So what they're looking at is your total THC. I'll kind of break it down. Where THCA is a precursor for delta-9 THC. That's the psychoactive form. So THCA is the inactive form of THC that's present in the plant. However, when you heat it, which is a decarboxylation, so if you're processing it, smoking it or turning it into an oil, it turns into the delta-9 psychoactive form of THC. When you decarboxylate the THCA through heating, you lose that carboxyl group, meaning that only 87.7% of the active THCA is converted to delta-9 THC. So what they're looking at is your THCA times 8.7, which will give you the amount of delta-9 that could possibly form from THCA. And that is added to the delta-9 THC to give you your total THC. As a grower, it's not really something you will measure. This is where the certified laboratories come in, where you're sending samples, ideally throughout the season, to monitor your THC levels. So here's an example of a certificate of analysis that a grower might get from a laboratory, which has the THCA and the delta-9, from which they would calculate the max active THC. In this case, it was 0.22%, below that 0.3 total THC, so the sample's fine. Something to just keep in mind if one is interested in growing, the USDA has released their interim rules for hemp production. So not all states look at total THC. Arizona does, so we're kind of already have a more stringent regulation on it. Some states were really just looking at delta-9. So if you've been growing, things will stay the same when it comes to our THC requirements in Arizona. And I can get more into this measurement of uncertainty, but basically they're trying to hone in on that legal limit. And several growers and the public in general have raised their complaints about this. There was a open period where folks could comment on these interim rules, and most of the comments were saying, we don't want this change of THC to be based on total THC, not just delta-9. So we shall see. Another rule that might change is the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Administration, will be doing the lab work to test for THC levels. So currently in Arizona, it can be an Arizona State Agricultural Laboratory or a certified lab. It doesn't need to be a DEA registered lab. That may change. Also, if you test above 0.3%, the USDA interim rules are saying they want law enforcement or a DEA registered agent to be part of the disposal of your non-compliant nets. No need to worry at the moment. These rules have been delayed until October 31st, 2021, or until they finish the final rules. But there was this open comment period where people expressed their concerns about this. And it seems the USDA does recognize that there are not enough DEA registered labs to handle the volume of plant material. So like they've said, they're holding off at the moment, and we'll just have to wait and see. If your crop does test above 0.3% and it cannot be remediated, then you would have to plow it under or bury it or in some way destroy the crop. And an ag agent will work with you through the Department of Ag after they've come and tested, and they'll even do a retest. But if it's for certain that you're above and there's nothing to do about it, you will have to dispose or destroy of that crop in some way. So it's a risk. There's no other crop that we grow that this is a concern for. So there is a higher risk with hemp, but hence why the research of figuring out how to best grow this and how to keep those THC levels down is so important. So now I'll move into just a basic agronomic overview of industrial hemp. So to start off, there are different kinds of hemp. We have high CBD hemp that's going into the CBD oils that we're now often seeing. Then there's fiber hemp that's used in the production of textiles. And then there's grain hemp, the seed of which is highly nutritious and is used as food source. And of these three different types of hemp, you have autoflowering and photoperiod sensitive plants. So photoperiod sensitive plants mean that they have a physiological response to the relative length of light and day. Hemp is a short day plant, meaning basically it flowers as there's more darkness or as daylight hours are less than 12. So if you're growing outdoors, this means the plants will start flowering during the fall season. Indoors, growers will switch to a 12-12 light cycle. These plants typically take longer to mature, about 110 days. Now they're also autoflowering plants. So these are not photoperiod sensitive, and they flower after a certain period of time. It doesn't matter the day length. These can flower approximately 60 to 90, or they'll reach maturity in only 60 to 90 days. They're often shorter or dwarf varieties, and for these, direct seeding is recommended, not transplanting or using clones. And the reason for this is that root-bound plants will flower. If you do transplant, it's recommended even within 7 days or as soon as that root touches the bottom of the pot to get it in the ground, because they will want to flower as soon as the roots start bounding up. And then you'll have this really small plant with no biomass on it. But autoflowerings are quite interesting and I think very promising for Arizona, where we'll have more flexibility in when we grow them. Typically, these photoperiod sensitive plants, hemp is grown in the summertime, but growing a hemp plant through the Arizona summer might be why we've seen some of these higher THC readings. So if we can grow an autoflowering in the winter, that might allow us to avoid the heat stress. So here's some pictures of autoflowering and photoperiod sensitive plants. On the left, we have an autoflowering hemp field. This is in Yuma, Arizona with Dr. Bindu Pudel, who's been doing hemp trials, comparing additions of compost or inorganic fertilizer and using drip or furrow irrigation. Now on the right, we have fiber plants, which can grow over 3 meters tall. So propagating hemp for CBD. As I mentioned, you can do seed. The seed can be either regular seed or feminized, which I'll explain. The concern with seed is genetic variability. Other than seed, you can do vegetative cutting, so using seedlings of transplants or clones. But like with all cuttings, the concern is pests and disease. So this is why it's important to source material from Arizona or compliant states. You want to make sure you're getting legal hemp plants. Not every state has an approved industrial hemp program. I believe Texas, theirs is still in the works. You want to make sure it's fully legal wherever you're getting your transplants or your seeds from, and ideally that it's certified seed. You can also request analytics. So this would be a certificate of analysis on any planting material, which would have a readout of the delta-9, THC concentration, and amount of CBD. So you can really know what you're planting. Going back to seed, a big issue, and I think why Arizona's crop was kind of variable, and this is across the country, is seed quality. you've had a lot of folks get into the industrial hemp business, a lot of small and large companies, but the data to back up the quality of the seed is often lacking. The seed is quite expensive. When the Farm Bill first came out and growers were getting excited, you were seeing seed sales for $1 per seed. That's quite expensive. So you want to make sure, when possible, that it really is quality. And I think what we're seeing now is that we're getting into year 2 in Arizona and year 5 and longer in places like Colorado, a sifting out of quality seed companies versus folks who are not so reliable. But anyway, back to seed propagation. So hemp plants are annuals. They're dioecious. So you have male and female flowers on different plants. Typically, this will come out to a 50 to 50 ratio of male to female plants. So it is important to check the plants for their sex. You can check the stalk node. This is where leaves and branches extend from the main stalk, for signs of whether they're female or male. So males will have pollen sacs or ball-shaped buds at the nodes, whereas females will have pistils, which are typically V-shaped white hairs. It can be other colors such as orange, but these V-shaped white hairs coming out of the reproductive organs. This is important to do, and I'll explain a little bit more why, but if you don't want to worry about having to sex your plants, you can also look into feminized seeds. So to feminize seeds, the plants, they've manipulated the hormones of female plants to get female seeds. This is usually done with colloidal silver or silver thiophosphate foliar sprays, typically in a greenhouse. And what these do is the silver inhibits ethylene production, which is needed to produce female flowers. This forces female plants to produce male flowers, the pollen of which lacks male chromosomes. So when that female pollen is used to pollinate other female plants, you get nearly all feminized seeds. This is great and a unique thing for cannabis and hemp production. It's not always the case that they're fully feminized, so you do still need to check your plants because of hermaphrodites. So hermaphrodites are plants that have developed both male and female flowers on the same plant. And this can happen on feminized seeds as well. So you need to look for the male flowers even on your feminized seedling. A small magnifying glass can really help in this. But it does bring up the issue if you're growing a huge plot of land, having the time and labor to go out and really check your plants. Oh. There we go. And as I mentioned, every female plant could become a hermaphrodite. So you do need to check even with your feminized seed. And this is all important because CBD is highest in unfertilized flowers. So what if the female flowers have become fertilized and start producing seeds, you get a dramatic drop in the amount of CBD. So you want to remove the males from your field, particularly if you're growing for processing into CBD products. Remembering that even 1 or 2 male plants in a field can fertilize all the females. So you do need to check, and there are all sorts of helpful resources online of how to check the sex of the plants. Some say at the pre-flowering stage, you can check those nodes. Others will wait until it's more fully developed into the flowering stage, but point is to just regularly be assessing your plant. Does help. So for seed propagation, as I mentioned, the regular seeds will have that 50 to 50% male to female. So you will need more seed because half of them may be males, and you're going to pull them from the field. Thankfully, the seed is less expensive, so there's a plus side to growing it. But you will put the energy and effort into growing those seedlings until you can sex them and then have to remove them. So growing feminized seed is attractive, but more expensive. You don't have to spend that time culling males from the field. But as I mentioned, a small percentage of these plants may still produce pollen. So you want to check the field if possible. So this brings us to vegetative or clonal propagation and why many growers are looking more into using clones or transplants. So here we have a mother plant and a cutting from it. The 3 to 5 nodes are recommended for cuttings, so you can stick them into your soil that you will later transplant. So using transplants or clones over seed, the advantage is there's less variability with clones. You can have a mother plant that you like, you know the genetics on it, you have the certificate of analysis, knowing the THC and CBD levels, which may change in the field, but still you have that data on it. You can also clone female plants. So you are pretty sure that you're getting a female plant in the field. Issue with this, these cloned female plants could still become hermaphroditic just with environmental stress or genetics that some plants are more prone to go hermaphrodite, but you're increasing your odds that you will have a female plant by cloning from a female. You also avoid the poor seed germination issue. A problem we had in Arizona was putting seeds out and just getting seeds to grow. So by getting a transplant, ideally you're guaranteed a plant coming out. Challenges are plant quality. As I mentioned, the issues with seed quality, you also have issues of plant quality when you're buying transplants or clones, especially if you're buying them from out of state or grower you're not familiar with. Just like with any transplant, there's disease and pest issues. There's some evidence to also suggest there's the potential for decreased root growth when using clones. Hemp plants have a taproot, so one benefit of using seed is when it starts growing, it can start sending that taproot down. You're not disturbing it. But I think more research needs to be done on clones versus direct seeding. And lastly, these transplants can just be more expensive. So if it's $1 per seed, sometimes you'll see $5 to $7 for a transplant. A helpful resource I found was Propagating Hemp for CBD through the University of Vermont, that's linked here. And also here at the U of A, we have Dr. Joel Coelho, who's doing interesting research on hemp cell culture. This is a new field, and I think his work will be interesting to keep an eye on. So moving on to research opportunities. So as part of that industrial hemp report that the Department of Agriculture put out, it stated that growers face many challenges in the first year of producing industrial hemp in Arizona. Some of these included insect pressures, irrigation practices, soil conditions, soil salts, seed germination rates, and extreme heat. So in that one sentence alone, you have a lifetime of research, really, that could go on, which is exciting and daunting. I think we have a lot to learn, especially here in Arizona, where we do have these extreme heat conditions. We have often salty soil or saltier water. So there's a lot of excitement and promise for hemp in Arizona. We do really well, but we do have these challenges, and research will help us figure out what are the best varieties and the best ways to grow in these conditions. So a general overview of some prospective agronomic research areas. There are varieties that need to be evaluated. A statewide variety trial would be great to do. Robert Mason, an ag agent down at the Yuma Experiment Station, has started some of his own variety trials there. And if we could expand this to statewide trials, I think that would be extremely useful information for growers. And what we saw was the data the Department of Ag gave out of the varieties and the percent of compliance. It's quite useful, but we don't know where it was grown. So if it was a variety that was 100% compliant in St. John's, will it necessarily be compliant in Casa Grande or Yuma? Other research is planting date. Jim Pauley, who at the University of Arizona has started a planting date trial up in Maricopa. I believe he got his planting started in February and he'll plant until April. So that's something to look out for. Other work is best management practices. Are additions of compost helpful? What is the correct planting density? How closely spaced should plants be grown or spaced out in the field or in the greenhouse? And pest and disease control. Dr. Bindu Prudel, also at the Yuma Experiment Station, as I mentioned, has started some trials with auto-flowering varieties and looking at additions of compost, as well as furrow versus drip irrigation. So her work is great, and they just had a field day. That's what Rafi saw me speak at, and I think that talk is, all the presentations are available on the Arizona hemp pilot program webpage, which is linked later in this talk. So again, another need for research is water use, drip or flood. Dr. Prudel is doing some of that down in Yuma, but we also need to understand water regime, the timing of watering. When is water most critical? During the flowering stage, during seedling development, at seed germination, or at later stages when THC and the other cannabinoids are being produced. Hemp is often touted as a low water use crop, but the question is less water than what? Less water than alfalfa, less water than corn? The answer to that question, I think, is key for hemp really becoming a popular crop and an accepted crop in Arizona. By knowing how much water it uses, we can know if it's really economically viable to grow the crop. And lastly, the effect of heat and water stress on THC levels. As we saw from that article that said the Arizona climate was blamed for these off-the-chart THC levels. Is that really true? Is it heat stress? Are there other issues or factors at play? And what is the effect of heat and water stress on THC or other cannabinoid levels? So this effect of heat and water stress is important to understand because THC and CBD have a shared precursor. In the biosynthetic pathway of all cannabinoids. So what we can see in this diagram, we have CBGA that's present in the plant, which becomes THCA, which I mentioned before is the non-psychoactive precursor to THC. However, the levels of these go up together. So the precursor for CBD and the precursor for THC both come from the CBGA. So if you're going to have an increase in CBD, you'll probably also have an increase in THC. And we're not really sure the decoupling of that and their relationship, and more research needs to go into how do we increase CBD, but also not increase THC in the plant. Some research on this has been done and is increasing. I just wanted to share this study where they were looking at the evolution of these precursors to THC and CBD, this THCA and CBDA content in flowers during the growth of plants. And what we're interested in is the type 3 chemotype, which are these low THCA to CBDA plants, meaning they have a low ratio of THC compared to CBD. What they found if we're looking at the purple chemotype, is that the cannabinoids increase until the end of the season. So this evolution can help us understand that are we getting an increase in THCA and also an increase in CBDA. THCA, the precursor of THC, seems to be increasing throughout the season. They also found an increase in both the CBDA and THC when trichomes develop. And this isn't shown in here, but THC and CBD increased in leaves and flowers during the last 6 weeks of flowering. So we don't need to focus on it too much, but this type of work is hopeful to help pinpoint and elucidate when are the best times for us to harvest the hemp plants. This is important because the USDA recognizes that THC content of hemp generally peaks as the plant ripens. So if producers delay harvest beyond 15 days, the plants will likely have a higher THC level at harvest than when the sample was done. I mean, they want you to sample within 15 days of when you harvest. If you were to have your ag agent come out and sample your plants for THC compliance a month before, that wouldn't really represent that final THC level. So here in Arizona, our sampling protocol is that an agent needs to come out and sample your fields no earlier than 14 days prior to when you intend to harvest. They will come to your field, they will sample a given amount of plants depending on how many you're growing. They'll sample from the top inflorescence, so the top of the flowers, from approximately 30 plants or so, again, depending on how many plants. And below is a table where they give the sample numbers depending on the total number of plants. So that sampling protocol I bring up just to share that if we can understand better the THC levels and relationship to CBD, I think growers would be more informed when they want to actually harvest, so we don't run into issues of non-compliance. So moving on beyond sampling are the health impacts and benefits of the cannabinoids present in industrial hemp. So cannabinoids are chemical compounds found in cannabis species that interact with receptors in the brain and body. And we have endocannabinoid systems. We have receptors for these cannabinoids throughout our bodies. And already there's a lot of research coming out of the potential health benefits. Particularly, there's one FDA-approved medication for anti-seizures that's primarily based off of CBD as its main ingredient. And I think now with the legalization of industrial hemp and universities being allowed to research not just the agronomic, but the health uses, you'll start seeing the growth in this sector, and perhaps why there are these economic projections of CBD-based sales dramatically increasing to potentially over $1.2 billion industry in the US alone. And part of that growth will be through the alternative uses of industrial hemp, of which there are many. You have textiles, building material like hempcrete, which is like a concrete alternative. You have food sources, medicine, and potentially even toilet paper could come from hemp. So it's quite exciting where, as we all have seen, the CBD oils have become really popular, but I think we're just at the beginning of exploring the many uses of this crop and the potential growth in the sector. According to the Congressional Research Service, there's over 25,000 marketable products that can be made from industrial hemp. And the US has been and is continuing to, or has been importing huge amounts of hemp-based products. In 2017, there was 67 million worth of hemp products, primarily fiber or food products and oils imported, 90% of which came from Canada. So the hope is that now that cultivation is legal in the US, that American growers can start absorbing some of this demand and benefit from it, where we're not relying as much on imports. One of the alternative uses that is gaining some excitement is animal feed. So hemp seed can be eaten by humans. It's high in fatty acids like omega-3s and omega-6s. It's also high in protein, fiber, and minerals. But it can also, beyond humans eating the seed, animals can eat the seed cake, which is the leftover residue after hemp seed oil has been pressed. These seed cakes are nutritious, and there's currently a surplus of them. Through making hemp seed oil, there's this leftover residue that currently isn't really being used beyond in compost, and this could be a potential feed supplement. As of now, the FDA has not approved industrial hemp for use in animal feeds, but folks are hoping and pushing for this to be allowed. Another promising future for hemp might be through the fiber. So with the new trade deal, it has been pushed that China will have to increase imports of agricultural commodities, including the cannabis plant. And specifically, this was in the bylaws of true hemp, which is the raw or processed fibers of hemp. So it's this strong bast fiber that was often used in ropes, and it can be used in carpets or rugs, and it does require a decorticator, which is a machine that separates the bast from the herd. And as of now, there's not a large-scale decorticator factory or machine in Arizona. There's one online to be built in Texas and in North Carolina. Farmers are forming cooperatives. I know in North Carolina's case, to put in the money to build one of these machines. And I think this is pretty exciting and could be beyond just the CBD, another avenue for hemp to take off. This is a pretty useful website for growers or those interested in the industry. Hemp Benchmarks gives the price breakdown for different hemp products. So part of this, the potential growth in the sector is making sure that it makes economic sense to grow it. So having reliable data on the actual revenues that farmers could potentially expect through growing it will be important. A lot of growers jumped into this. I saw it in Vermont where people got excited over the price per acre. There was nothing like that. But what hurt them was not having a buyer for their product. So any resource where we can be smart, that will help us be smart in making sure it's economically viable to grow it and potentially make money from it is important. So lastly, I'll end on an area that I'm particularly interested in, which is the phytoremediation potential of industrial hemp. So phytoremediation is the decontamination of soil and water by using plants to absorb or break down pollutants. Heavy metal contamination in Arizona is a huge issue. With just the mines alone, the EPA estimates it would cost $2 to $5 billion to clean them up. We have several Superfund sites, and typically we use physical or chemical-based methods that are quite expensive. And the plants that are often used for phytoremediation have low biomass or shallow roots, like Arabidopsis species or mustards are often used. However, hemp has shown some promise as being a potential for phytoremediation plant. It's greater biomass and it has much deeper roots than some of these other accumulating plants. So there is some evidence to date to suggest that hemp could be a potential phytoremediator. Here we have a study that looked at cadmium, nickel, and chromium that was uptaken in the roots of hemp. In Chernobyl, there's evidence that hemp was planted to remove contaminants, so the data is lacking on what they actually found. But I do know of some research at New Mexico State University where they're looking at industrial hemp remediation of Superfund sites and then using the biomass and primarily the seed oil for biofuel production. So that's pretty exciting, and I think highlights the need for more understanding and research on the potential for phytoremediation uses of hemp. And I'll end on this slide of, I've put together just a few resources that might be of interest to our listeners. There's the Cooperative Extension Hemp Pilot Project headed by Dr. Bindu Prudel. For information, we've got the Arizona Industrial Hemp webpage, the Department of Ag. This is a great book, Hemp Bound, for those of you that are curious about the history of hemp cultivation in the US and future of it. I highly recommend Hemp Bound by Doug Fine. And on the right, we just have a few grower guides that I found useful so far. So thank you very much. I'm happy to answer any questions, and here's my contact information. Thank you.
I want to thank Andrea for a highly informative seminar presentation and for being a pioneer in the SEAC seminar series. And I want to also congratulate you for maintaining the interest of more than 30 people throughout your presentation. So you've done everything just right, and you gave us lots of food for thought. And I really thank you for doing this first time around in the SEAC Covering Environments seminar series. I have just one question before we open it up to others, and that is, what sense did you get from interacting with Yuma farmers about transitioning from traditional crops like soy and maybe lettuce to hemp? Do they see that as a financially worthwhile thing to do?
Yes and no. I think the price per acre for CBD hemp is very attractive if you're growing corn and soybeans. Figures are thrown out of $12,000 plus per acre, and corn and soybeans and barley can't compare to that. The issue is getting into that market. And that's where people, they would love to do it. I think there's an excitement to do it, but they're wondering, how do I get a piece of that? And a big part of that is having a buyer for it before you plant anything. And I think we'll see more of that as the industry develops in Arizona, where there are more processors. But right now it's kind of lacking, that they don't know who to sell it to, and who's going to buy it from them to make that money. They're interested in it, but they wonder, how do I participate? Hello?
Rafi, there are a few questions on the Q&A window.
Yeah.
Would you like to ask those questions, or would you need some help with that?
I need some help, so if you know how to do it, please go ahead.
Okay. Sure. Andrea, thank you so much for an explanation. A lot of topics and information covered, from history to varieties, and the climate, and research potentials and applications. You have quite a bit of questions here. So you have a question about the electrical conductivity and the daily light requirements of hemp if you can elaborate on that a little bit.
So the EC and the, what was the other?
Electrical conductivity and daily light integral.
I'm not sure what the EC threshold is for hemp, and I can look into that. I do not think it is particularly salt tolerant. I think
Okay.
that's perhaps why we saw some issues in Arizona. And the daily light requirement, that too, I'm not sure. I'm familiar with this, the trigger for flowering and for the photoperiod sensitive plants. You know, it's a function of daylight and temperature too when outdoors. Days are getting cooler and also days are getting shorter. But
Okay.
I can look into that.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure the details.
Sure. Another question was actually related to the environmental conditions. You know, you mentioned about 12 hours of light and dark period for the production. And the question here is asking about what would happen if you change that balance of dark period and light periods?
Well, I'm not sure, and there might be people on the line who are more familiar with this for the greenhouse production, because I'm more familiar with the field. But I think when you've switched to 12-12, it triggers flowering. Now, if you were to reverse that, would it go back into vegetative? I'm not sure if you can reverse it by switching it. I wonder if you've gone to 12-12 hours, then the plant has triggered flowering and it will continue flowering even if you've gone back to a vegetative light cycle.
Okay, all right. We have another question about the pollen travel. So the question is, how far can pollen travel from a hemp crop? This is kind of related to our hemp crops susceptible to illegal cannabis cultivation and pollination from these illicit sources, and does this fertilization impact on seed production and cannabinoid spectrum of end product?
It's a great question and big concern. I've heard 10 miles that pollen can travel, and so this is going to be an issue for growers who are trying to produce for seed. You know, Arizona is a great place to grow seed. I could see that sector grow for industrial hemp seed, but being in communication with your neighbors is really important. I know in Yuma they have maps for, you know, vegetable production and who's producing seed and where. And I think the Department of Ag or someone could and should kind of lead the way in that, to make sure that we don't have this issue, at least, let alone for illegal cannabis production, but just if you know, no one near you is growing hemp for food. And hopefully, I think what might I don't know if it's hopefully, but what might have to happen is if you're growing for seed, that be more indoors in greenhouses, just to prevent that issue. But the pollen can travel, and in terms of illegal hemp or cannabis production, yeah, it's a concern of, you know, is someone growing some weed somewhere, and is that going to potentially contaminate your plant? So the location of where you're growing is important, but communicating, and I know there's a Arizona Hemp Association, hemp growers, some platform or means that can, you know, that growers are really aware of one another. We can't control the illegal, but at least we can try and be aware of who's doing what legally.
Okay, all right, great response. Thank you. You have a comment here. One of your participants is actually from Sinaloa, and he says he he's not familiar with the crop, with this plant, but he found your presentation very interesting, and especially for its use for medical purposes, medicinal uses. Okay, so we have another question here about the insecticides. So the question is, are there any insecticides labeled for use on hemp yet?
Ooh, so in this, on the Arizona Department of Ag webpage, there's an approved pesticide list. And on there, I think there may be an insecticide listed, but that list, they're using the Colorado. Arizona's currently basing their approved pesticide list off of Colorado. So it'll just link you to Colorado's, but point is that there you can find a list of all the approved insecticides, pesticides, anything you can use on hemp.
Okay, okay. All right, let's see. Another question here is about, okay, would hemp be superior as an agronomic crop rotational tool to be used as a disease break cover crop and or increase the microbiome within the soil to be beneficial to subsequent crops? Yes.
Yeah, I think beyond, even if you're not selling it for final, for CBD or grain or anything, just having it in crop rotation is could be super beneficial, particularly the high biomass crops. That's a lot of plant material and organic matter to be putting into soils, particularly here in Arizona where that's an issue. Where the more organic matter we can get, and if it has deep roots, all the better. So I think it's really exciting for that reason, and there's evidence to suggest that it does break diseases up, and commonly was used as in rotation before it was made illegal.
Okay, all right. Andrea, you mentioned that if among our participants, if they want to comment on the EC and data light integrity requirements, one of the participants mentioned that yes, photosynthetic hemp varieties can be switched back to the vegetative, and I see a kind of an electrical conductivity indoor used is 1.6 decisiemens per meter, and indoor daily light integral for hemp is about 50. Also, it seems is a high demand. So that was a comment that I wanted to mention here. Okay.
Thank you. I knew someone knew the answer on the call.
Definitely, they're highlight crops, and they can tolerate high light intensities. Okay. I see some questions about certified organic. So if you want to touch on that in terms of the organic or certified organic with hemp production.
Well, yeah, as of last year, I believe 2019, you could get your hemp crop organically certified. So, and now you should be seeing organically certified CBD products, which, if anyone's getting into the industry, I think, we have seen the price of CBD hemp, the biomass, drop significantly since the passage of the Farm Bill. It has gone down over the past few years and each season, but for value-added products or organic certified hemp, that price, you're still getting a premium for it. So it seems like that might be a way to go if possible. Okay. It's a health, people are often using these for health products as medicine, so they're willing to pay more for a product that they believe is safer.
Okay. All right. Wonderful. Here's another question, Andrea. Is it possible to increase the % female rate of cannabis seeds through selective breeding? or is there a procedure to isolate female plant producing seeds before sowing, propagating, or planting?
As of yet, that would be the dream if you could look at the seed and know. So with seed, not necessarily. For breeding, for more female inclined plants, I don't know. Maybe someone on the call is aware of an effort to do that. I know there's breeding for plants that are less inclined to become hermaphrodites. So to kind of prevent that, and usually from what I've read, that those strains or seeds don't last long. People start reporting that, hey, I got these female seeds, or this seed variety's always going turning into this hermaphroditic. So, but all I've heard so far is that doing feminized seeds seems to be the main way to try and increase that.
Okay. I want to check with Rafi, Andrea, and to see if how we're doing in terms of time here. And there are a few other questions, but I want to check with Rafi first. Rafi, still there?
Yes, I am. And I think Andrea has done a terrific job answering questions. I noticed there are a few more that you haven't highlighted yet. So feel free to go ahead and do that. We have 5 more minutes if that helps you.
Sure, absolutely. And I just want to say that I don't know how far we were able to reach, but you have participants from Australia also following you. And as far as I know, one from Sinaloa, Mexico. So we might have others from other places joining. So thank you so much, everyone. So another question is about, could you use grafting to increase root growth and flower size?
Oh, that's a great idea.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't see why not. I have to share, I'm the controlled environment and the graph, that's new to me, but I think it's worth looking into to try grafting. They're looking at cell cultures. I think what's cool is this is a whole new field. So if you could find that grafting really worked and you could get increased root growth that you didn't see in cuttings, why not?
Sure. We know the benefit of grafting for vegetable production, for other crops to be grown. So as you said, yeah, could be right. Could be beneficial for root growth or other growth related enhancements through grafting. Yeah. Another question is, there seems to be some relation between the UV, maybe A and B UV light on cannabinoid content, secondary metabolite production, basically. What are your thoughts on that? The use of light spectrum, and in this case, the participant is referring to the UV light.
Right. I think it's the case. I know not to get myself in trouble, but in cannabis production, it's a big thing, I believe. And people have said, well, for Arizona, that's what's really going to make Arizona's hemp crop really attractive, because we have all the so many days of sunlight and UVs. So we could probably have a quite potent crop with high cannabinoids. I haven't looked too much into it of the effect, but I think it is being discussed is that it could be a good thing. But the downside is it a good thing for THC to
look at it? Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Let's see. Oh, there was a comment about I read grafting on Humulus japonica, Chinese hops, is possible.
Ooh.
That's a comment I see there.
So they're related. Yeah, so they're
mhm.
cousins, they're related species. So you'd have a super plant, hops and
Mhm.
hemp. Yeah.
Here's another question about does this commodity have an MRL pesticide for the US?
I'm not aware. I would refer to that pesticide list.
Okay, okay. All right. I see a few other questions. I believe they were also related to the environmental kind of conditions. There was one question about what is the desired relative humidity range?
You know, in that in that University of Arizona, or pardon, University of Vermont propagation guide that's on the slides, that she mentions that, and I can't recall at the moment. My apologies.
Okay. All right. Sure. Sure. Let's take this maybe as a final last question for you, Andrea. The question is, as growing microgreens are becoming popular, could you talk a little bit about hemp microgreens?
I haven't seen it, but I think we should and could, and that's a great idea.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
It could be quite nutritious.
All right. Well, I think these are the questions we had for you, Andrea, and I want to say thank you so much for the excellent presentation. But before we close, I want to also refer to Rafi and for his closing remarks here. But thank you so much, and thanks to everyone, all the participants joining for the seminar.
Oh,
Yes.
thank you. Yeah, I'm
Yes.
more than happy to have done it.
Yes, I also wanted to add my congratulations and thank you to Andrea. And I wanted to mention that a significant number of comments that we received all had virtual applause.
Oh.
So I hope you heard it.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
My final thank you is to Dave Bogner, who has the patience of an angel, the knowledge of a guru, and the stick-to-itness of an amazing person. He made it all possible from the technical point of view, and including rehearsals we had, and including last-minute solving of problems. We couldn't have done it without you, Dave. Thank you.
Indeed. Thanks to Dave. Thanks
All
to
right.
Dave.
You're welcome.
Okay, until next time, this is
Okay.
the Controlled Environment Agriculture Center series of seminars, now online live and also on our website. Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye. Thank you.